Welcome to Agency Nation Radio, powered by the Big I, where we ask insurance professionals to turn on the mic and share successes, challenges, and stories that made them the professionals they are today. I'm your host, Kasey Connors, the Executive Director of the Big I Agents Council for Technology, and today we'll be talking about our newly released Tech Trends report that combines insights from our partners, including carriers, vendors, industry companies, as well as agents. With me today, I have Andy Siegel, President of Siegel Insurance, and Michael Mellars, President and Chief Operations Officer at Legacy Risk Solutions, both members of our National ACT Committee. Welcome, Andy and Michael. How are you guys today?
Doing great, Kasey. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing wonderful. Thanks so much for having us here.
Awesome. We're excited. So to kind of tee up our conversation, our conversation today is an important one. It's designed to talk and give the audience a little insights into our, the technology trends happening in 2026. Our report overall is, grounded in a few things, direct research from agents as well as insights from the ecosystem. And, I think what we heard really is consistently that 2025 marked a turning point. It made the year transformational, not just with the arrival of new tools and, the bombardment of AI. It was a shift also in mindset. Technology really moved kind of from the back office into leadership conversations. And it has become less about what tools exist and more about how technology affects profitability, staffing, risk, customer experience, and long-term sustainability of your businesses. So we're going to kind of unpack these things today, but let's start at the top. Andy, let's start with you. In 2025, how did technology enter the discussion, say, at your own agency's leadership conversations?
Kasey, thank you. Technology has always been forefront for us, going back to the Y2K days even. Technology has been key to making our agency run efficiently. It's helped us in our best practices, measure metrics and making sure we're efficient, doing things the right way. But I feel that technology is changing so fast, it's hard to keep up with it. And it takes time to evaluate these different platforms that are out there based on your workflows and based on your carriers and based on your management system to help you do things most efficiently. I'm sure Michael can attest to this too, but finding good account managers and good producers and good support teams are difficult, and using automation to help them do their jobs better is our goal.
Yeah, and I think, do you find, around when you're thinking about how to help your agency, are you involving, your staff in those conversations, or, how, or is that bubbling up, from a business management conversation at your agency?
We're definitely involving the leadership of the office. We've got 3 or 4 key people, and they all come in different ways and how it impacts their workflows. Just because we're doing something the same way now as we were several years ago, we need to make sure we're staying current. And if we're still doing it like we were in the past, we're behind.
Yeah. And I guess how do you, and maybe, Michael too, you can hop in here, like how do you actually get everybody on board in making that shift? So like, I think it's, we talk about this too. It's like, you need to, keep moving, keep evolving, but sometimes technology is hard. So I guess, is there, a specific advice, you would offer of maybe key things that you should be having in your conversations, or, what, I think obviously all agencies are different, but, I think sometimes it's like we know we should be doing it, but doing it is hard.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that, right? So when you bring technology into an organization, people tend to be there's a subset of the population, right, that is very they kind of get very nervous and they're very concerned, and I think that's part of the change management is getting people to understand why you're bringing technology into the organization, right? And the difference it can make. And I go back, I was thinking about the evolution of technology and how we got to where we are today. And I think it starts with, it was probably 12 years ago, I met a guy who had figured out how to use macros in Excel to populate policy forms, and he worked for an MGA. And and he kind of revolutionized the process of policy creation. So I started talking to him, and he showed me how to use these macros, and then the conversation for macros slowly evolved into conversations about robot process automation that we started adopting, and then robot process automation started drifting into conversations about artificial intelligence. And we got here, and along the way, I think you have to show people what exactly you're trying to do. People always assume that when you bring technology, you're trying to replace them, right? So if you can assuage their concerns and show them early on that, listen, we're trying to solve the processes. We're trying to solve the low scale, repeatable tasks that irritate everyone, that really prevent you from doing the job that we want you to do, which is being a service to our clients and our community. And once people understand that, I think that they're a lot more open to the discussions, because then you can show them, hey, listen, this particular process that you do, we're finding a way to automate this. And when you bring them into the conversations early, I think it really does help assuage those concerns. But we're all challenged, as Andy said, we're all challenged to do more with less. Because we do have an aging population base, we do have a hard time replacing talent, and as the market turns and goes from a hard market to a soft market, we've got to make sure that our expenses aren't exceeding our revenue, which means we've always got to be mindful of how many employees we have in, and making sure that we're maximizing that and finding ways to be more efficient on the back end. And that really has been the journey for us. But we're pretty big on creating committees, and those committees consist of people from all the way from the client service up to the executive team, so that everyone's got a voice at the table, and it's not like we're the wizards behind the curtains, or we're just machinations and things going on in the dark and doing things that are going to create problems in the organization. I think that really helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And to also, echo on Andy, you mentioned just we're in this place that, technology is moving incredibly fast. In the Tech Trends report, we did a survey of the membership, and the top tech-related challenge that members, big I agents, are saying they have is keeping up with the pace of technology change. There's fatigue. There's a lot of pressure to do what others are doing. But I think you touched on that, Andy, and Michael, you just mentioning that you also have to take a step back and understand some, just start with one thing or learn one thing that can take that off your plate. So I think with technology evolving so quickly, do either of you have actionable advice on how to keep up without drowning in information overload? Because I think I could spend all day reading about things, but it's well, then is that worth time spent? Everybody only has a certain amount of hours in a day.
Well, I think in the old days we had a lot of time educating our staff on insurance issues, and now there's a lot of education and training on technology issues. Our management system vendor has a conference every year. We send people. Michael, I know your agency does that too. And just for perspective, our agency is about 18 employees, plus or minus, with full-time, part-time. And Michael, you've got hundreds. And the issues really are the same at the end of the day, measuring what everybody does, being consistent, and taking advantage of all this technology we have. I've said that we have these incredible management systems that are like a Ferrari, but we're stuck in first gear with them because nobody knows how to operate and do everything in them efficiently. Everything is sort of a hodgepodge of the way we used to do it. So we're trying to be more on board with new processes and new tools about gathering customer data from their carrier that sends to us automatically, that then pushes out to the rater, that then comes back as a proposal. If we can cut the time down using automation from quoting from 2 hours to 15 minutes, we can be out in front of a lot more people. And we're still trying to get past those manual processes. And these automation tools are varied in how they do that.
And in Kasey, the point you made about there just being such an overwhelming amount of technology in the marketplace. And I think one of the things you have to do is you have to be mindful of the fact that technology works for us. We don't work for technology, right? So we started the process by saying, well, what are the pain points within our organization that we need to solve for? And then seeking the technology to solve it. I think if you're just in that stance of just passively waiting for everything to come to you and then you decide what you want to adopt is a challenging way of doing things. And then you try to bite off more than you can chew, because I think at this point, I've seen an application that solves for just about every part of the insurance lifecycle, but they're all disparate applications, right? This solves this point, this solves this point, this solves this point. There's not really a holistic solution that says, hey, we're going to, cradle to grave solution, AI solutions for your agency. So you just have to be mindful of, first of all, how much technology adoption you want in any given year, and what problems are you trying to solve for. And that's where you really need to focus and not get distracted by the new shiny things, because it feels a lot like the old .com boom, right? Where there was so much going on. It was hard to know who the winners and losers were going to be. And it's the same sort of thing with technology and with AI. Is there's so many disruptors, so many startups, so many new applications and things. You have to be very disciplined in staying focused to your tasks.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think, Andy, you made an interesting point, because I think, most of the AMS providers are rolling out, amazing things, particularly around AI. Tools are expanding, while at the same time, new tools are coming that are doing overlapping things, kind of to your point, Michael. I think an interesting point that came out from the agent survey was that predominantly 43% of the respondents said their primary method for training teams on how to use new technology was actually peer-to-peer or informal coaching. Whereas, I think in our industry, we're relationship based, that you want to hear what your peers are doing. But there's also so much education out there at the fingertips, that your providers are also offering. So how, do you align that in balancing, to thinking from your standpoint, Michael, on training your teams? And I think because it's that balance of obviously people are hearing it, in their networking, but then, I think it is important for it to come, from your agency too. And this is what we're using and the why behind it.
Yeah, there's a huge, step one is identifying the technology that you want, finding it, going through all the demos and the training, everything, and then deploying. But from the deployment, if you're not doing a good job of demonstrating the need in your organization and then training people to use the tool in an effective manner, then this is just going to be yet another application that's sitting on your shelf, right? So the adoption is super important, which means that you have to have people. You have to have the champions within your organization who say, this is going to be your tool that you're going to help us deploy. You're going to be responsible for training people. You're going to be the one making sure that people are using it, right? And that we're constantly monitoring it. And candidly, if people are not using it, then there's maybe a business case that says we don't need it, right? So while we tend to adopt technology very quickly, we are very reluctant to get rid of technology that we don't need. So I think that's part of it, right? If we've trained everyone up and they know how to use it and they don't use it, that's a separate conversation altogether. But yes, training has to come. You can do online training, right? But at the end of the day, most people want to get their hands involved in it. They want to get shoulder to shoulder training with you, and you say, this is how you do this application, this is how you work this product. And then they can start getting in there and getting used to it. So yeah, definitely has to come from internal sources.
Yeah, training has been haphazard at times. There are some tools out there that have helped us with training, but with more people working remotely, it's harder to get them connected to your workflows and have that culture that they learn about being in the office. I mean, Michael, you have 40 plus locations for your agency. Are they all doing things the same way? And I would say probably not. Even within my office, my people aren't doing things the same way. So the end result gets you there, but which way is the most efficient, and which tools should they be using to do things most effectively, as well as reducing E&O and being consistent?
Yeah, and I think part of that, Andy, is you're dealing with people across the spectrum in terms of their understanding of technology, right? So younger employees tend to have a better understanding of technology. They grew up with it. They know how it works. But you get into the more seasoned employee base, their understanding of technology is radically different, right? So if you're trying to push an AI application on someone who has a very light understanding of technology, it is absolutely not going to work, right? And that doesn't mean that person doesn't have a function in your organization. You just have to redesign the way work is getting done so you've got the right people using the right tools.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I think shifting a little bit, because you brought it up, Michael, our favorite word to talk about is AI, and how that's evolved, and from agentic AI, and also balancing it with still the human touch in the industry. I think there's a lot of concerns around data privacy, compliance. You also mentioned just technology taking over jobs, but I guess have you have you seen a particularly effective use of AI that you want to share, or even how you might be leveraging?
Yeah, so we've actually had a couple of wins with technology and AI technology. There's an application out there that we took on relatively early called Commulate. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a direct bill reconciliation application. And it can take disparate forms of direct bill statement from carriers, whether it's a piece of mail that's scanned in, a PDF, an Excel sheet, whatever it is. It reads the documents, goes to your agency management system, finds that policy, and reconciles the bill, learning along the way that, when a policy is downloaded into our system, the policy number may not be exactly the same as the way it is on the direct bill statement. So it learns, hey, when I'm looking at a traveler's policy, this statement's going to have 3 zeros that aren't here, and then it can figure out and reconcile, and it's been very, very effective. So, to Andy's point, an organization our size, our direct bill statements are absolutely enormous. So we were able to literally redeploy 2 people within our accounting team because that was their sole function, was direct bill reconciliation, to be able to take that off their desks. And we didn't get rid of them. We redeployed them to other things in more complex tasks. And it's been very, very successful. And I think that's one that I think everyone would say, hey, that was a great application. It really performed the way we expected it to, and it's done a really great job. Another one recently that we just took on is an application called Canopy Connect. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that one. That one's making a real splash in the industry. But so far, we've had some really great uptake with that. It's one of those things that when people actually use they are blown away by it, and they say, this is unbelievable. I can't believe, I ever was able to do business without it. But it's a slow adoption thing, right? So I think producers in particular are stuck in their ways of how they've done business, and bringing a new application to them in the sales force is difficult. But so far it's been very, very good. We've had a lot of success with it. We're currently demoing an application called Scribe. It's very simple. It does work. It does workflow and process building for you. And so far that's a big thing for us. Is, as Andy said, we have a lot of remote offices, so making sure that we've got really tight workflows and processes is really important, but it's an extremely time-consuming task. So to have an AI application that can learn how you do things, watch the process, and create the workflows for you, it's been absolutely remarkable. And that's another one I think we're pretty excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, we've been testing that too, as we've have done upgrading our website and stuff. It was very helpful training new staff. Process documentation is painful and important at the same time. So I think from AI, I think 2026 will be a huge year of just increasing how much of our overall industry is leveraging AI, because I think there are agencies like yourself who have been using it for a couple of years, and then from our data though, I think still about 60% of our respondents were just still kind of on the edge of maybe they're testing out leveraging ChatGPT or Copilot for a few things, or so I think, how do you think about AI to Andy at your agency, and for the future, on how you might adopt some things and build in from that? Are there certain things you're thinking about?
We're slowly dipping our toe in, but I'd love to use it more for policy checking, E&O reduction, comparing last year's policy to this year's renewal. Taking a client's policy that we get through Canopy Connect and comparing it to the proposal that we've generated from one of many carriers, and pointing out, hey, here's what's different. We as independent agents bring value to our clients. Some buyers just want a transaction. Great, they're not really for us. But we can bring value versus calling an 800 number or some other method. Again, we're a heavy personal lines agency. I think these tools can really help. We haven't found the right one. Michael said they're very disparate, and do they integrate with your management system? Who's talking to who? Eventually, the agency management vendors buy these products and work them in. And I think we're kind of in the Wild West. And then We have used AI a little bit for simple things to help our account managers phrase simple questions like, why do I need replacement cost coverage? Plug it in and get a nice solid answer. Little stuff that helps them word things more easily understandable for the client who's checking on that.
Hey, Andy, can we go back to policy checking that you were talking about? I think that's a really big hot button for us, right? So we use virtual assistants to do our policy checking. And if I told you how much money we spend annually on that task, it is embarrassing how much money we spend. And you really begin to wonder if the juice is worth the squeeze. And, if you push that process over to AI, right, which so many companies are doing, the question then becomes, well, what matters and what doesn't when it comes to policy checking, right? Obviously the things that matter, are the limits the same? Is the named insured correct? Things like that. But do I need to know that this form changed from this form number to that form number? I think that's one of those things that our industry needs to be taking a really good look at. I think there's some combination of human interaction and AI when it comes to policy checking to just make that process a lot smoother and, more importantly, a lot faster, right? Because at the end of the day, our primary defense on E&O is with the client is, did you read your policy? Right? But the policies get hung up in backlogs because we're trying to policy check. So we don't push those policies out to the clients very quickly. So it could be 3 months after the policy is issued before they get a document in their hand, and our defense goes out the window if we have not provided them with a policy form, right? So then the question is it just better to take a policy, put a disclaimer on it, say, hey, read your policy and put it in their hands and not check it at all? Or do we say, hey, we need to check these 10 fields, have AI just, run it through an AI application that can just bam, 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 good to go, send it out? Or do you need to have a human being going line by line to make sure that coverage is exactly what you said it was supposed to be? I think that's a really interesting question and something that as an industry we still need to solve for.
And because AI is a learning tool, I think it can learn what you're working for, like Comulate, as you mentioned, learned how to read your statements and match it up in your management system. Policy checking goes to so many levels that we've seen carriers leave off endorsements towards the end of a policy period. The renewal doesn't include it. So you want to make sure everything's there, and you could have labor do it. Again, VAs are cheaper than your own people, but at the end of the day, it's still human labor, human capital that goes into it. And AI can do these tasks and probably make fewer mistakes. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. AI learns. And I've heard questions about your E&O coverage. How does it protect you? And AI is going to still manage it better than humans. Maybe not a whole lot better, but more efficiently, much more quickly for sure. And you'll be able to have a human review that, spot check it every now and then too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a top, balance, in all those things of, data privacy, but, having those guardrails in place of what you're using and then obviously the compliance risk. But I think you're totally right, Andy, is like, sometimes people are so afraid to say use AI because, they saw AI made a mistake. Well, humans make mistakes too. So, it's having that balance. And I think, it's a lot right now of hearing like leveraging AI, but also, with a human element too. So it's not just like AI all by itself. It's, it's that balance of kind of the checks and balances is an important piece.
Yeah. In case I'd like to add too, we're using AI, add this through our phone system. It listens to every phone call. It gives us a summary of that call at the end. It comes in as an email. And it's amazingly accurate, not 100%, but you can sit there and take notes for 10 or 15 minutes, and this will give you the full summary in seconds.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting embedded in these daily processes that are just helping. So it's like you sometimes even forget. You're like, that is an AI helping me do that around, I think, overall.
And another one to take a look at I'm really interested in is those the AI phone receptionists. I think we have not gone down that rabbit hole yet, but that's really interesting. And I heard a demo of one of these AI receptionists, and it is pretty remarkable technology. I'm very interested in seeing what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think I think the conversation around that too, particularly is interesting. I think there's some being transparent to your clients, but it's very helpful, and it's still I think that just is freeing up some time for to still have the human relationships but like focus on the real relationship part. Can help the agencies I know that have been using the phone assistants overall. So I think, in all of this, we're talking about, data, there's security, how, you're also just being transparent around AI, how you're rolling out new technology, but I think, from a large standpoint, there's a culture shift in our industry. There's some change management talk. I think there's always change management tied to technology because you have to, particularly as agency leaders, you guys are setting the tone of how things are evolving, making the decisions on technology adoption. But I guess to kind of bring it back to the people piece, like how do you guys also foster kind of a positive culture around change management? Maybe when everyone is not so excited about new tools, or having to learn something can be just time consuming. So there's that time frame where it's like it's not necessarily helping me this second because I'm learning how to use it. So how do you kind of foster that positive culture in your agency, and kind of maybe whether that's creating champions or just curious?
Really mindful of how much technology you're deploying in any given year, because your staff really can only absorb so much, right? So there's all this new and exciting stuff, and we want to be on the the leading edge and deploy all of this stuff, but you have to break it down into manageable chunks. So maybe you say, hey, this year these are the two problems we're going to solve for, and we're going to deploy two different pieces of technology to do that, and then we're going to take a break, right? And we're going to let people get back in the business of being in the business, and then we'll tackle the next ones. Because I think if you come at people with too much too fast, it just overwhelms people. They get very frustrated. They can't do their job. They just it can be really difficult, and it does create a culture challenge, right? Where people are just overwhelmed and exhausted all the time. We just did an integration. We had an acquisition. It was very, very large. So we just brought 350 people into our agency management system. And that has been an enormous undertaking. So we are going to take a huge collective breath before we even think about deploying something else agency-wide. Now, we may, within individual departments, deploy different, smaller applications that may be, used to them, but we are not doing agency-wide changes unless there's something that's critically important. You have to give people time to get comfortable with the new technology before you move on to the next one.
That makes sense. What are your thoughts on that, Andy, and a culture?
You mentioned having champions, and that's huge. We do have people who advocate for certain things and processes, but I always look at what are my peers using. I don't want to be the leader in everything, but I know if it's working over here with a friend, we should try that too. And most of the programs or processes we've looked at will give us or share, hey, here's someone in your area who's using this service, and check that out. Going to carrier meetings, you talk to your friends. And one friend I was at a carrier meeting with, and they use bots to requote all of their personal lines. What he said was, the bot was expensive, but their retention has gone way up. Because a client doesn't care to be moved every year, but they know that the agency looked at it and found this is still the best option. So this bot that cost a few $1,000s a month has increased their retention to more than easily pay for itself. Like, wow, that's a great idea. And all automated, all done behind the scenes, and some human looks at it at the end to decide what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's, a good point, particularly as, the market is shifting, rethinking about how you're remarketing, et cetera. So
just networking with my peers is where I learn a lot, and then I try and bring that back.
Andy and I have a mutual friend who goes to every InsurTech conference there is, and he knows every piece of technology. So fortunately, we have someone we can just go to and say, "Hey, what do we need to be looking at next?" It's helpful to have those people in your life.
Yes, networking, building your, there's a lot out there. So, well, as we are wrapping up, is there anything else, that you might want to share with our listeners as they plan for 2026 to leave them with some takeaways?
I mean, I would just say be open to change. We all get set in our ways, especially as we get older. But Michael, you're hiring a lot of younger people in your agency. You see a lot more younger talent, and they bring ideas in about doing things differently. Maybe they come from an area outside the industry. And again, a process is a process, but be open to new ideas and suggestions and checking technologies. And again, I love the ACT resources, not just here to plug ACT, but ACT is a tremendous resource for all things AI, workflow related, process related, and there's tremendous tools on the ACT website for that.
And I think that it's somewhat of an admonition, right? But you've got to embrace it. Technology is bringing radical change to our industry very, very quickly. And you'd be surprised how many people I talk to, and they say, "Hey, we don't allow our employees to use AI." And to me, that's a big concern, right? Because our industry is evolving so fast. If you're not paying attention, you're going to get overtaken. And so I think you really do have to find a strategy within your organization to how you're going to use it, and what works best for you, because you don't want to be the person that gets left behind because you just decided you were not going to you change the way you do business. Say, "Oh, well, the way I've been doing it for 30 years has worked and I'm not changing." Well, the industry is evolving, and we have to evolve with it. And I think this is the fastest way to do it. Get plugged in, like Andy said. Get to know people, network. Listen to the people in the room who are good at this and who do it a lot. Right, Kasey, Andy, people like that. You guys know what you're doing. Talk to people. I think we all want to help each other out. And would love to have conversations with you about what is working and what isn't working. That's critically important. I mean, that's why we're all part of things like the Big I, is for those networking opportunities to talk to our peers and talk about what we're doing on our industry and our agencies that may be different, or innovative that other people haven't done yet or haven't thought about.
And I'd like to add one more thing too, Michael. You maybe think about this, but we need to react to how our clients want to communicate with us, whether it's texting or email or the e-signatures. They want instant gratification. And all these tools we're talking about, the AI tools that are out there, allow us to get back to them faster with more accurate information. So the world has sped up. We need to respond the same way the clients want to hear from us. And if it takes an hour to hear from us, maybe that's too long for some people. I'm at the car dealership buying a car. Why do they email us? Why don't they call? Well, they don't want to call. Maybe they'll text. We need to be able to adapt and use the tools out there to work in client time, because they're the reason we're here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point of how, I think it matters how, that's who you're serving. That's how the world is right now. So, well, I appreciate your guys' time very much. So I think you guys have shared some amazing insights. And it's, nice to have that perspective. We hope everyone turns in and can download our full Tech Trends report, as well as leverage some resources like Andy mentioned, whether that's even just, we have some sample AI policy guides, some things to get started around AI. You can check that out on the Big I website, independentagents.com, under technology. But thank you very much for tuning in to this edition of Agency Nation Radio, powered by the Big I. And if you have enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. And if you have a story for Agency Nation, please contact us at hello@agencynation.com. So thank you so much, Michael and Andy. It is always good to see you and chat.
Thanks, Kasey.
And
Absolutely.
I appreciate your time. Take care.